All right. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Complete Game, episode 10. I'm your host, Curt Schilling, along with my son, Garrick Schilling. What's up, G?
What's going on, everybody? How we doing?
Good. We're going to start quick, like the Yankees. So this is the the top of the first in Baltimore. The Yankees against Kyle Gibson. Home run, home run, home run, ground out, home run, double, double, ground out, single, fly out. Four home runs, two doubles, and a single in the first. And what eventually was a 15-3 drubbing of Baltimore. Ben Rice homered in the first, also homered in the second. In what is was a drubbing. A downside in a 15-3 win. The double in the first by Jazz Chisholm saw him come out of the game immediately after that at second base. It's coming up lame. Hopefully that's not a long-term thing. In Boston, the Red
Hang
Sox
on,
hit.
real quick before you move
Yeah.
on. I got a cool stat from that game. In MLB history, two pitchers have allowed the following in a game: three home runs through three batters, four home runs in the first inning, and five home runs for the game. Both did so this year versus the Yankees in their first start of the season and on the 29th day of the month. Nestor Cortez on March 29th and Kyle Gibson tonight.
Ouch.
Yeah.
Ouch. And whenever you run off things like that, the more impactful thing to me is you're talking about a game that's 140 years old, right? So tens of thousands of games. And when you're doing something that's never been done before or only been done.
Or one of two guys. Yeah.
Right, right. It's either a dramatically awesome achievement or a day of that you'll never ever forget. And I'm
Yeah. Sorry to break up your flow, though. Go ahead.
no, no, no. That was actually a pretty neat little point. Yeah, Boston hit five homers in the first three innings, and you had Garrett Crochet getting it more than enough uh, in a 10-2 win for them. Philadelphia Washington was a game that went I think 3-2 into the eighth. Eight runs over the last inning and a half to a thrilling 7-6 win, except the walk-off win was with the wild pitch. So I've seen that more than a couple times this year, which is just sort of anticlimactic. Good news for Jacob deGrom fans. He is apparently back. He went six, four hits, no walks, no runs, punched out seven. That could be a big, big deal for them this year. Wanted to kind of touch on base on something. The Colorado Rockies, who are I haven't checked today. What is their record today? They were 4-23 the
Four
other
and
day.
four and 24.
They're 4-24, which is historically bad. And they're trailing the White Sox by three games in the "we suck" battle. Which again, and I say that I'm joking. Excuse me. I've been on a couple teams that were bordering on that, and
Well, I mean, you always used to say to guys that I played with too, like every guy on the end of every bench of every professional team is better than every guy you ever played with in high
right,
school. So
right, and that
it's
counts.
the we suck in the MLB
Right,
context of
right.
we suck.
A minus 72 run differential, by the way, 1-9 the last nine, 1-14 on the road, 3-10 at home, and their season is effectively over. It was over 2 weeks ago, but the franchise and the stadium itself is, I think, 30 years old this year. And there was a lengthy piece about its history, and it's something that I keyed in on very early on with Colorado, having gone there and pitched at Mile High, where the Broncos used to play, and the altitude and all the things that go with that. But I wanted to get into a kind of an in-depth conversation about what I think if you're running this organization, how you have to approach it, and it's never. I don't think it's. I've heard of a million different philosophies, and we'll go over them. But I want to show you this picture, and what this picture is this is a picture of all of the biggest and smallest ballparks in the big leagues, and it basically the lines inside the outside perimeter lines are all the farthest distances in the big leagues for ballparks. So you've got 353 down the left field line. You've got 302, which is Fenway Park, is the shortest, difference of 50 feet. You'll see up here in the center, this right here, this is all Coors Field, right? Coors Field's over here as well. It's over here. It's at I think 352 down the left field line. It's insane. Um, and then you've seen a lot of these smaller ballparks. You'll see Fenway mixed in there with the shortest left field line, a pesky pole. But you can see dramatic differences in ball length and size of ballparks. And it's not to me, it's not the apparent first impression that is the most important thing, right? So in Coors Field, when you pitched in Coors Field, for the most part, I always had my outfielders play shallow because the thought was if the ball's going over your head in the air, it's going out of the ballpark. So, and what you might not know is that the grass in Coors Field is incredibly thick and incredibly high, and they thought that would taper off the offense, and what it did the exact opposite. Couple different points about Coors Field. Every single base runner is in scoring position. If you're on first, you're in scoring position. Every ground ball through the infield is two bases at a minimum because of the distance with which outfielders play, the depth they play, getting to a ball, and the speed. Ground balls get killed going through the infield, so they don't get to the outfield quickly on the ground. There was a theory for years about, hey, sinker ball pitchers, ground ball pitchers. Turns out that sinker balls don't sink in Colorado. And so the analogy and how I want to explain this is pitches 99 out of 100 pitches, different pitches in the big leagues. If there's 100 variants of pitches, different pitches, 99 of them act differently in Colorado, right? The 12-6 curveball, which comes in straight and goes straight down, generally has a hump and is soft. That 3 o'clock to 7 o'clock sharp slider, 3 o'clock on the dial to 7 o'clock has a hump. It's soft. Split fingered fastballs, which generally you count on them coming in and dropping, they come in and float down. They're softer. And there's nothing you can do about it. It's just the difference in the way that the spin of the ball and the lack of air in Colorado changes the way the ball travels. And I didn't know this until there was a guy named Billy Swift who had just a monstrous big sinker ball pitcher guy who pitched in Colorado. And I didn't know that not only do sinkers, so you got the power sinker that goes down and away from the arm side. In Colorado, it's much softer, but also it doesn't always sink. Sometimes it cuts, which I can't even think of a worse nightmare for a sinker ball pitcher, right? The only pitch that is exactly the same at Coors Field as it is at PNC and San Francisco and Tampa is the straight four seam fastball. But you'll throw a tick harder in Colorado because of the air. So your 95 could be 96 or 97, but the straight four seam fastball will be straight. And to that end, I think you have to look at it from a couple different perspectives. First of all, if you're building a franchise in Colorado, the one thing you can plan on is that 81 of your games every year are going to be played in your home field. That being said, the outfield fences aren't the problem. It's the outfield space. There is so much. Look at the difference in just sheer outfield volume, the space between some of the shorter parks and some of the longer parks, with Coors Field being this one right here. Your outfielders have to be what we call in baseball rabbits. They have to, and it's an athletic skill that translates. If you can cover massive amounts of ground at Coors Field, and now think about this: you've got Coors Field, you've got San Diego, which is a monstrous stadium. You've got the Dodger Stadium, which always has had a big outfield. Arizona's got a unique outfield, a little bit different. And you've got Colorado. So in your division, which is where the schedule leans heavily, your three rabbits in the outfield, you basically have to give up power from your outfield positions, which are traditionally your corner outfielders, your power guys. Can't do that. You have to have, in my opinion, 4 to 5 outfielders who can just flat out get it, because you're going to have a staff of fly ball pitchers. You have to. And in that environment, all through the division, they'll play well. their strength will. So what you have to do is you have to give up the power in the outfield, unless you find an Aaron Judge who can cover tons of ground or something to that effect, or old school Jim Edmonds, Ken Griffey Jr.,
Steve Finley when you were there.
Steve Finley. Yes, those guys will cover ground no matter what ballpark they're in. But also, more importantly, it forces you to look for your power in your infield and behind the plate, right? And your DH. You're going to have to find your home runs from somewhere other than your outfielders, because the number one attribute for your outfielders needs to be the ability to go get the ball. And that's going to be more important because you're going to build a different pitching staff. So the one thing I learned, and I thought about this early on as I sat and watched before I pitched in Colorado a lot of different times, I couldn't watch a game and feel good about pitching there. I couldn't imagine being a Rocky starting pitcher, sitting on the bench for 4 days before my start, watching the nightmare stuff that happens in there. And here's the reason it happens, this nightmare stuff. It's not the home runs in Coors Field, it's the hits. Broken bat singles are oftentimes doubles there. Make a great pitch, jam a guy, jams it in the outfield. You've got so much outfield with outfielders playing back. All three of your outfielders, and here's the other thing about your outfielders. You need 4 or 5 outfielders whose strength is going back on the ball, because you're going to want them all to play shallow, to steal that extra base from the ground ball through the infield, or to steal that broken bat single, which means you're going to give room behind them, which means they're going to need their strength. Brain Anderson was my first great example. Brain Anderson was better going back than he was coming in. He was a phenomenal outfielder. But you're going to need to find outfielders whose strength is going back on the ball, because they're going to need to play shallow if you want to put together the right roster.
Like Dalton Varsho tonight.
Like Dalton Varsho. If you guys haven't seen the catch, and Garrett, you'll link the video.
Yeah.
First of all, two things. One, I played with his father, who was a phenomenal, phenomenal human being. He looks exactly like his dad. But that catch and all of the athletic things around that catch are why professional athletes are just different.
It's an acrobatic catch with no real acrobats.
Well, it's an unathletic event that turned into an unbelievably athletic event.
Hand-eyes.
He tripped and fell, and then ended up making a catch behind his back.
He spun around.
It's insane. You got to see it. And so click on the link to look at this catch. Anyway, so you've got what you have is an outfield of 5 guys who all can run and go get the ball. Now, the difference is, if you're building this organization, you have to have a pitching staff of 13 power pitchers. The only thing you can count on is the 4-seam fastball, being the 4-seam fastball. Then you have to teach 13 guys to power the ball. And obviously they're all going to have breaking balls. And when they work away from Coors Field, they'll be better than when they are at Coors Field. But the fact of the matter is, all 13 of your guys have to be power arms, and they have to have 4-seam fastballs, in my opinion. But what even more so is, you have to have another 4 to 6 guys who aren't in the big leagues, who are big league pitchers, because physically Coors Field is harder to play and much harder to pitch in. It always took an extra couple days for my body to recover from pitching in Coors Field. The drain is, and I know there's scientific methodology and formulas for days that will explain why, but you always hydrated more, and you'd use oxygen chambers, oxygen rooms, to because your body performs differently. And also, let me sidestep that from an organization perspective. Their AAA team is in Colorado Springs, which is at altitude. I would demand that all 5 of my minor league teams, from rookie league to my AAA team, were all located in cities at altitude, at that altitude. I don't want my pitchers coming to the big leagues experiencing Mile High for the first time in the big leagues. I want them to mature and grow and teach them in the environment they're going to participate in. That would be an absolute must for me. But if I'm drafting, I think I'm drafting college power arms more so than other teams, because I need these guys to get to the big leagues earlier in their career, and I need them to get to AAA earlier in their career, so I can have what basically would be a shuttle. I would want to break spring training every year with 17 to 20, 22 big league arms. And the only way to do that is to get guys who are not out of options, younger players in AAA. Also, I think you have to do is you have to go out and find 6-year minor league free agents, power guys, who are okay starting the season in AAA. Now, nobody's going to be okay, But what you're going to have to do is financially compensate. Say, listen, you're going to be in AAA. We're going to be using your option and moving you up and down because we need to you're going to want to generate and flush your bullpen back and forth and give these guys rest. So you pay them big league salary, so to speak, to play in AAA and to be on that shuttle, so to speak. And players, for the most part, could buy into that because you're going to use my options. Using my options is beneficial because the sooner my options run out, the sooner I have to be kept in the big leagues. But from an organizational approach, I think you have to do that. Offensively, listen, you're going to factor in again. You're playing 81. One of the things that makes baseball beautiful, if I hold this up and I were to show you all 32 rinks in the NHL, they would all be square with rounded corners, and they might have a couple feet of dimensional difference.
This is like what we were talking
Right,
about a couple weeks ago with Wrigley.
right, right. But nothing like this in professional sports. Football fields are 52 yards across and 110, 120 yards long. For the most part, soccer fields have in pros have a maximum dimension. But this playing a game in a park this big as opposed to a park this big, it's a different game. It's a completely different game. And when you're at Fenway and you're drafting as the Red Sox and you've got that college left-handed pole hitter, that's perfect, right? I want this guy who pulls the ball to work down the pesky pole and work down the right field line. For the Yankees, same thing. You want right-handed power hitters who can drive the ball the other way, left-handed hitters who can pull. You get your hit at Coors Field. You don't really have to differentiate other than to factor in over 100 of your games are going to be in big ballparks, so you're going to want true power. Um, but more importantly, you have to focus on the pitching, and it's almost a different philosophy. A lot of teams, and I heard Theo Epstein say this a long time ago. He drafted bats and bought pitchers. He was more because of the risk factor involved in pitching, and Buck Showalter, who I think is probably one of the highest baseball IQ human beings I've ever been around, said something to the effect of, I would spend all 20 rounds of my draft on pitchers. I think there might be a year or two where you have to do that. Just stockpile your organization with power arms, all power arms. And again, you know, if a sinker baller can't count on a sinker, then a sinker baller is a guy waiting to happen. But what you do is if you have them all pitching in the same ballparks growing up through the minor leagues, they're learning command. We talked about command and control, right? You This ballpark just absolutely begs for command inside the strike zone with the four-seam fastball. And it also would help you to educate your pitchers at a younger age how dominant a fastball can be because a fastball is not one pitch. Remember the strike zone we talked about? I had those 9 squares. The fastball is 6 pitches. Fastball up and away, middle away, down and away. Fastball down and in, middle in, up. At 95, those are 6 different pitches. Fastball's not one pitch. And this is a ballpark where you have to primarily lean on your fastball to get outs. And if I can't count on my primary fastball doing the things that I need it to do to get people out, which is throwing a sinker that cuts or a sinker that just kind of floats in, and that's what you're going to see. Breaking balls and sharp stuff are soft in Colorado. That's the only term I can really think of. They just and it's just you're not going to change that.
They don't have the same bite.
They don't. There is no bite in Colorado. There is none. And that's a great word. There is no bite on pitches. So sharp sliders and sharp curveballs and the split that relies so much on that last 5 feet of drop, none of that is sharp in college. Now there'll be an exception every now and then. And the humidor thing didn't actually do what they had hoped it would do. The fact of the matter is the hits in the ballpark are much more lethal than the home runs. And if you're giving up home runs there, but you're command and not walking people, you're giving up solo home runs, and solo home runs don't beat you. And if you look at the article, and you'll see it, on ESPN, they talked about 30, and they interviewed players, and these are all like guys that competed against, and all the pitchers talk about the same thing. It was a different experience, drastically different experience. And I remember when Darryl Kyle was there, Darryl Kyle had just a nasty monster hook that was his primary dominant pitch when he had his fastball, and it wasn't that thing. And the end of the article finishes with a quote, which I loved, which they asked, I can't remember which one it was, about pitching there. And he said, what was your thought when you got into Coors Field? He was like, I couldn't wait to get on the plane flight out. I'll tell you this, Going to Coors Field and not pitching there was the greatest 3 days in the world as the starting pitcher. But from an organizational approach, you have to draft power pitchers. I think you have to draft college power pitchers ahead of high school pitchers, but that's for your scouting department to determine. You have to build an organization, and I would have, my goodness, I think at every minor league level, I would have an extra pitcher or two because again, physically, pitching in Colorado is different. If 81 of your games are going to be in Colorado, your position players are going to need depth on the roster because your position players are going to fatigue differently. But for me, as a pitching coach, my number one concern is I want to be able to go six deep starting without this starter bull crap. And I need my pitchers to eat innings. And if I've got my guys in rookie ball, you can almost make an argument that they would benefit them to play in a juiced environment like Arizona, because Arizona's also known for the thin air and stuff like that, which is why they spring train there. I need to get my pitchers as used to this as possible. With the strength and conditioning in professional sports today, there's a completely different regiment for players on the Colorado Rockies, as there should be, because their bodies are subjected to a completely different game. And I might be sounding like I'm making too much out of this, but I can't begin to explain to you the substantial difference in day-to-day life for a major leaguer in Colorado and elsewhere. It's just not the same. And you don't know this going into it. It's one of the reasons why they've always had to overpay for pitching.
Well, I mean, they talk about it in every other sport when you go to
Right,
play in Colorado. It's the altitude.
right,
So, I mean, it's
right.
not just a thing with baseball,
Right, but the
like
difference
the
is,
dimensions of the
right?
park
And
are.
you remember when in New England, the Patriots would always fly to Denver a couple days early to get acclimated to the altitude. They're getting ready for a game. When baseball and hockey, same thing. When you're going to play the Avalanche, you're going to play a game. When you go to Colorado for baseball, you're going in for a 3 or 4 game series. That's 72 to 96 hours. And I always flew ahead to Colorado as a starting pitcher if I was pitching there because I wanted an extra day, and I'm the starting pitcher. They didn't need me, but part of my pregame preparation was hydration. That's the other big piece. I would tell you as a major league pitcher, of all the weather conditions in existence, the number one worst possible scenario by a magnitude of 1,000 is dry. I can handle wet. I can handle hot. I can handle any environment but dry because in Colorado, your mouth is dry, so you can't get moisture. So you have to use the rosin bag. You use the rosin bag to your tongue, you get dry. And the worst possible thing a pitcher can have is trouble gripping the baseball. And there, Colorado is as bad as any environment I ever pitched in. Arizona was the same in a lot of ways because of the closed stadium, but dry is terrible. It's never hot enough to sweat profusely in Colorado. So you couldn't go under the hat or any of those other things. But all of these conditions set up to make it hard to play baseball in Colorado. It's not why they're 4-24. They're 4-24 because they're playing poorly because the other teams have to endure the same conditions. But there should be a marked home field advantage for the Rockies, and it should come from the way they built their team. Because all of the things that I'm talking about from a Rockies perspective and building a team translates when they go to San Diego or Phoenix or Boston or New York. Your fast outfield is still fast. Your power pitching is still swing and miss pitching and with better breaking stuff. But when teams come to you in Colorado, they're less than they were before they got there from a pitching staff perspective. They're not going to be as good. And you have to take advantage of that. And I think if you start a trend where pitchers see success, then Colorado becomes the potential. There's no chance. The only guys that sign in Colorado, to me, are the Mike Hamptons of the world who got incredible contract. They paid him at the top of the pay scale because he knew what he was getting into, and it was a nightmare for him. And he was probably as good an athlete as anybody ever played with. But the fact of the matter is, you have to overpay for pitching, and that doesn't necessarily mean you're getting a good pitcher. You have to overpay for the right pitchers. You have to put your money into the right, and you have to have, in my opinion, you have to have someone leading the organization from a pitching approach perspective, teaching command from the top down. That's beyond anything else. That's the most important thing in any organization. But in an organization like Colorado and the conditions that team plays in, at least 81 games a year, It's probably paramount to everything else. Teaching command from the time you draft these guys, drafting guys with advanced control in college and high school. A lot of times you'll see that guy throw a 99 in high school or 98, but it's the nuclear 98. Nobody knows where it's going. Well, you can eventually teach that guy to get control possibly and throw strikes, but you need this another step above, which we talked about last episode, which is command. You need guys who can manipulate a four-seam fastball inside the strike zone. And then when you go on the road, their breaking stuff is sharper and all the things go with that, but they have to be able to survive. And it's also a confidence thing. These guys, and like I said, I can remember sitting there watching games thinking, oh my God, I don't want to pitch here. And I know sitting out in that bullpen, when the phone rings, there are a lot of guys saying, not me, please, not me. They used to have so it used to be in the Colorado bullpen, the relievers started a tradition and they had bricks on the bullpen wall, and you could only sign the brick if you gave up four or more runs in one inning. And it soon came to be that the brick wall it became this thing. And it was kind of funny, and everybody would, you'd sign it and all the things, and you write out your inning or whatever. And the GM got a hold of it and had them go down and sandblast it and remove it. And, that's just somebody who never played the game not understanding dark humor. But and you had to have, I, closing a baseball game is one of the hardest things to do in sports, to getting those last three outs. The greatest closers ever had no memory. Your entire staff in Colorado has to have that approach because there'll be a game where you're going to go out and go four and a third and give up 14 hits and 8 runs, and you might have made a lot of very good pitches. You're going to have to do it 5 days from now. And that separates, the professional athletes from the rest of the world in one sense is most professional athletes have short memories or they have motivational memories. Like, I'm not going to let that happen again or things like that. But when you're asking for it, and they talk about it's a different game there. And
It's the Michael Jordan meme, and I took that personally.
right,
Like it's just you take everything with onus, and you're very, very personally motivated,
right,
or you like you're saying short-term memory, like that's already behind me the minute I step
right,
off the field.
right. But the dramatic difference is they're going to play 81 games there. Nothing you can do about it. And we use, how I always used to, one of the first things I did in spring training was I got this season schedule to figure out my umpires. But I also, when I went to Arizona, when I got the season schedule, I looked at Colorado, where it was, where it fell in the schedule, and if I was or was not going to pitch there. Because the game before I pitched there, I would, and I take this with a grain of salt, but in my head, I would be like, okay, if something happens and I've got a 9-0 lead, this would be a game I'd be okay moving out of the game in the seventh inning because I'm pitching in Colorado, right? Or the game after, I would look for that extra day or not throw a bullpen in between because physically I'm going to be different in that day. And this took me years to realize, but every guy that pitches in Colorado has that with every single home start. You don't get to skip Colorado. You're pitching on the homestand, bro. It's 10 games. You're probably going to make 2 starts. So I guess this is a long-winded way of saying if you're running the organization in Colorado, you have to take and I don't think I'm saying anything like too surprising, but the fact of the matter is you have to approach drafting pitchers, signing pitchers, teaching pitchers, and managing a pitching staff completely different than every other team in the big leagues. And there are a lot of coaches that know this and a lot of coaches who know exactly what I'm saying and they've already known it. But for the layman and for the fan watching, one of the reasons watching in Coors Field, next time you watch a game in Coors Field, watch how many hits end up between the infield and outfield where things happen, where two bases are taken, extra bases are taken, and watch where the outfielders play. They should play different. But as a fly ball pitcher, you have to be a fly ball pitcher in that ballpark too, I believe. Because if I can't count on my sinker, I'm not going to count on my sinker getting ground balls. And like I said, the grass in Colorado was thicker than any grass in the major leagues. And great, it slowed the ball down, but the problem is the ball through the infield died, and you'd literally have an outfielder running 75 feet to pick up a ball, runner standing on second base. So, well, hopefully that was insightful. But again, remember when you're watching, not all things are created equal, especially ballparks. And your ballpark of your team is one of the very I think significant determining factors in how you draft and how you sign players and what you're looking at in certain players. Um, so yeah, so there's that. And um, I wanted to. You got anything, bud?
Yeah, just real quick on the dimensions of the ballpark thing. If you guys have not caught on, we are on youtube.com/Curt Schilling. If you want to go see the visuals that we're talking about last week when we're talking about the strike zone and command and dimensions of ballparks like Coors Field and Wrigley Field. We don't have a ton of visuals yet, but those that we do have a tremendous impact when we're talking about this stuff. So youtube.com/Curt Schilling. Make sure you guys leave comments if you want to have questions asked on the show. We're looking for stuff like that. So
Yep, we're in our infancy. We're gonna grow this thing to be monstrous, and
we're open-minded
yeah,
to
you'll talk about
taking
anything.
it in any different direction.
Right, baseball, purely baseball.
Yeah, in the
Um,
baseball, within the dimensions we were talking about tonight.
right, right, and career wise, teammate wise, anything. You guys can ask me anything, and
But I did have a couple. I wanted to try something out with you right now
right,
if you're up for it. So I got two questions that I found on the internet today
all
from
right,
baseball dads. All right, and I
okay,
have one that's like a little more serious, and then one that I think you'll get
okay,
where you roll your eyes a little bit. But one we kind of touched on a little bit ago, just talking about like mental toughness being a pitcher. I'm not sure about the kid's age, but this dad asks, I was talking about to my kid about mental toughness and just lack of playing time. I.e., he pitched this year and he would control the game and do great, but if he had a bad inning, he would let it compound. I kept telling him throw strikes and they'll either strike out or put the ball in play, and the seven guys behind you can bail you out or not. I don't know if that was the correct advice. This was also something that you and I talked a lot about when I was younger because growing up being your kid, a lot of that stuff did feel bigger than it was
yep.
because I grew up watching you play. So,
Well, okay, so obviously, not knowing his age, that's a monumental thing to
but
this,
he's
right?
pitching, so you can
Right.
probably assume like
Let's say he's 12.
10,
Let's say he's
12 years
12 years
old.
old.
Yeah.
Um, it's hard to explain to a 12-year-old that that bad inning isn't the end of the world,
Yeah.
right? Um, but it isn't. And more importantly, when you're coaching your kid, the moment to recognize is not the bad inning, it's the immediate inning after that he has that's a good one, right? You point out the fact, all right, look, dude, you just bounced back, punched out two guys, had a 3-3 down inning, 2 innings after you thought you couldn't get your sister out, right? Focus on, don't ever, at that age, never coach a kid with don't or can't or you shouldn't. It should always be, here's what, this you can, go. It's always be from a positive frame of mind and a positive reference when you're coaching your kid, because outside of your grasp, the world's not going to be as kind. So when, I'm not saying sugarcoat anything, but be honest, oh, okay, listen, you had the worst inning you've ever had. Thankfully, it's over. It has nothing to do with the next inning unless you allow it. And getting kids to, because I did in the big leagues. I let bad innings carry over and cause bad games and things like that. You never stop doing it. What you end up doing is doing it less. And my advice to parents is it should be always be positive reinforcement within reason. Don't lie. Don't say, you know what, that wasn't your fault. Make your kids accountable, and the make it so the opinions that matter to them are the only ones that should. Their teammates, you, and as a parent at 12, you know what? Play the game hard, play the game right, and play the game with effort. Outside of that, let it all go.
Great. And then the other one is I have a 7-year-old who loves baseball. He is insanely athletic and he is one of the better kids on his team, even though this is only his second season playing. Many of the other kids on his team have played since they were 4. Many players play spring and fall seasons. My boy really wants to get better. 7, by the way.
Right.
My boy really wants to get better, and unfortunately, my coaching knowledge isn't the best. Plus, sometimes he wants nothing to do with my advice. So, have any of you dads paid for private lessons? I can't afford much as one-on-one goes. Is it worth to pay for a few lessons
Not at
for
7.
your 7-year-old?
No, well, and I get that, right? Because people, listen, travel ball for the most part is the biggest scam in existence. Um, I didn't play, I played all different sports until I was a teenager and when baseball became my focus, but travel ball's crap. In the sense, if your kid's good enough to play in the big leagues, he's not going to be invisible. I don't care where you go to school. Word gets out. There are hundreds of thousands of what they call bird, or thousands of what they call bird dogs, which are local baseball people who a team has contacted to say, hey, listen, if you see anybody locally, let us know. If you're, and this is why I try to explain to parents, your kid, he really isn't Ken Griffey Jr. the second,
That's
right?
that's what I'm kind
Right.
of why I read
When
that
your
one.
kid's 7 years old, the only thing I would urge you to do is to facilitate an environment that allows him to play as much as he can. If he's incredibly athletic, it's going to come to him. And you'll eventually get, and there are videos everywhere of teaching fundamentals if you want to help him with fundamentals. But the only thing you're fundamentally teaching him right now is the proper way to catch a ball and throw a ball.
Yeah, that's like so the bottom line of that, I thought after reading it initially without talking to you was the kid's 7 years old. Does he really like the way that's written? Does he really love the game
Right.
or do you love watching, which is
Well,
awesome. Like
right. Do you love it for him?
upcoming dad cannot wait for these types of
Right.
moments, but it's also there we've talked about it in an earlier episode. There's a very fine line to walk where is it your dream? Is it his like
Well, here's the thing. You grew up loving it because when you and I interacted with the game, it was always fun. It was wiffle ball. We were having fun. So I think young men equate the experience, the positive experience of dad time with whatever that involves. With you, it involved wiffle ball and pretending to be a left-handed Derek Jeter and all the things that went with that. But that doesn't change when you're 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. You want to spend time with dad and you want to make dad proud and you want dad to say, oh my gosh, all the things that go with that. That let the kids do that. My dad never forced me. He forced effort and he forced integrity. Play the game hard, play the game right if you're going to play it all. Otherwise, he would throw BP and all the other things that go with that. But there was no travel ball and all. If your kid's a 7-year-old and he's incredibly athletic, then it'll all come to him anyway. It'll happen, and he'll get noticed by the right people, and the right people will coach him, and all the things go with that. And
and he also mentioned like he doesn't have a lot of money to pay for
right,
lessons, even if that was there's no one-time lesson that's going to give him anything, especially at
no,
7 years
at
old.
7 years
We're
old,
talking we're
just
talking about a game earlier tonight that ended on a wild pitch.
right,
Just enforce
right.
fundamentals. If he really wants to learn, like we're talking about the game within the game, you can start to impart that stuff on him as he gets
Well,
more
he'll
and more.
watch, right?
Yeah.
If he loves the game, he's going to be watching the game. He won't get bored. And having a 7-year-old watch a Major League Baseball game is a feed into itself,
Yeah.
right? But those things. Listen, at 7, just make sure the glove he has fits him. Make sure he's throwing properly, and make sure he's throwing with a properly weighted ball, not a baseball. Something at 7 that's proportionate to his hand, be it a tennis ball or whatever. And he should have a tee. Let him hit off a tee all day long, every day. That's more than enough. He'll teach himself. He'll come up with his swing. He'll come up with, if you want to pick it up a notch, you have a tee and you have a wall he's hitting against, and you draw a square in the middle of that wall that's tee high. And how many times can you hit the square? Because that's the ball coming off the bat and line drive, right? Little simple things that you don't have to teach them. Just let them physically see them, and they'll physically